My name is Ji Tong, and I find myself mired in the quagmire of an orphanage, contemplating this wretched life of traversing narratives. My mind resembles a barrage player, intermittently displaying lines of text. The villainous couple has arrived. A high-energy warning ahead. Poor protagonist, soon to be adopted. The days of hardship are about to commence. Who is that silly child playing in the mud beside me? It's Ji Tong, the expendable female supporting character, destined to survive no more than 3 episodes. I silently rolled my eyes. What's wrong with playing in the mud? Who am I bothering? Not far away, the original female lead, Liu Yan, timidly stands beside the matron, clad in her faded dress. I must admit, the protagonist's halo is formidable. Even with malnutrition, her delicate visage remains pitifully enchanting, evoking my sympathy. Within her large, glistening eyes lies a hint of barely perceptible pride. Ha! What a little rascal. The matron wipes my mud-laden hands clean, her face radiating warmth and kindness. Tong Tong, today a kind couple is coming to adopt a child. You and Liu Yan are to be considered. I blinked innocently and asked in a childlike voice, Matron, what does fanbai mean? Alas, I had not mastered pinyin, and I mistakenly remembered Fanpa, villain, as Fanba, turning defeat into victory. The matron paused for a moment before responding with a smile. It likely means turning defeat into victory. It refers to someone who is quite formidable and capable of winning. My eyes instantly lit up. A winner? A strong person? How delightful. In this life, the last and the next, I, Ji Tong, solely desire to associate with the powerful. What of love? Can it be consumed? Money. I desire an abundance of wealth. No sooner had the thought crossed my mind than a strikingly handsome couple strode in with an air of indifference. The man was so breathtakingly handsome it was almost infuriating, while the woman possessed a beauty that was utterly staggering. Both exuded an aura that warned others to keep their distance, akin to the king of hell and his stunningly beautiful consort. A quintessential villainous pair. The barrage erupted once more. Here they come. The unhinged villainous overlord Li Xiao. The brooding flower Wei Lan. Protagonist run. These two do not appear to be good people. Liu Yan instinctively shrank behind the matron, her shoulders trembling slightly, embodying the essence of a frightened fawn, perfectly illustrating the phrase, I see and sympathize. I pursed my lips. As the second most beautiful child in the orphanage, I scoffed at such naive tactics. I relied on strength. While Liu Yan was still stewing in her emotions, preparing to use tears to sway the villainous couple, I decisively launched into a sprint, wrapping my arms around Li Xiao's leg. Uncle and Auntie, adopt me. I'm really well-behaved and especially voracious, not picky at all. My voice rang out, robust and clear. The room fell into silence. Liu Yan was petrified. The matron was petrified. Li Xiao and Wei Lan were equally taken aback. The barrage exploded. Wow. This expendable supporting character is breaking the mold. She. Has she stolen the protagonist's script? 666. I give this maneuver a perfect score. Li Xiao, my future father, furrowed his brows in a manner that could crush a fly, gazing down at me, clinging to his leg with a radiant smile, his expression inscrutable. The beautiful lady beside him, my future mother Wei Lan, wore an equally peculiar expression, though her lips appeared to twitch slightly. Was she stifling a laugh? Undeterred, I continued. I can dress myself, use the restroom independently, and I never cry or fuss. I'm exceptionally low maintenance. Wei Lan finally succumbed to her amusement, bursting into laughter. Although the smile was faint and her face bore an unmistakable weariness, that smile was truly enchanting. Li Xiao shot a glare at Wei Lan, who immediately reined in her smile, but her gaze towards me had evidently softened considerably. Let it be her, Li Xiao ultimately declared, his tone brooking no dissent. I inwardly rejoiced with a triumphant exclamation. The plan was a success. Liu Yan stood nearby, her eyes reddened, gazing at Li Xiao with an expression of pitiful grievance, as if he were a heartless scoundrel abandoning his wife and child. Brother, you are overacting. The barrage of comments continued to flood in. The madly obsessive villainous father and the gloomy flower-like mother, when the female supporting character returns home to find one wielding a knife and the other also brandishing a blade, will witness the formidable power of the villainous couple. Our female protagonist can finally escape the tormenting grasp of her villainous adoptive parents and grow up in peace and safety. Such a bunch of ignorant souls. What's wrong with the villainous couple? They have wealth, food, and new clothes to wear. Doesn't that surpass life in an orphanage? Moreover, even if they wield knives, I have my ways to persuade them to lay down their weapons and embrace righteousness. To reform and contribute to a harmonious society. Li Xiao directly seized my suspenders, tossing me into the back seat of the luxury car like a chick. The child safety seat was as soft as cotton candy, and I nearly drifted off to sleep immediately. Wei Lan sat beside me, gently stroking my head. Her hand was cool, yet her touch was tender. I instinctively wrapped my arms around her and planted a kiss on her cheek, sweetly exclaiming, "Mommy?" Then, I blinked my innocent big eyes at the bruises under her eyes and the faint marks on her wrist, feigning naivety as I asked, "Mommy, how did you get hurt?" Wei Lan froze abruptly. She said nothing, merely holding me tighter. I felt warm, wet droplets falling onto my shoulder, few in number, but undeniably tears. Oh, I remembered now. The comments had mentioned that my bargain mother had a tendency for tearfulness. TSK, this generation of villainous parents is truly difficult to manage, putting the expendable female supporting character in a predicament. Has the female supporting character poked the villain's nest? How did she become the cherished darling? It's a stretch to call her the cherished darling, but at least the beginning has been relatively smooth. Li Xiao glanced at us through the rearview mirror and snorted coldly, though it was unclear to whom he directed his disdain. I leaned against Wei Lan's embrace, inhaling the faint, cool fragrance emanating from her, and contentedly closed my eyes. The days ahead stretched long into the future. 2 days of bliss had barely passed before I sensed an unsettling disturbance. Early the next morning, while I was still drooling in my princess bed, I was roused by the commotion emanating from downstairs. The sounds of fierce arguing and the clattering of objects being thrown could be heard from my cheap father's study. Resembling a demolition site. Slipping into my slippers, I cautiously leaned over the banister to peer down. To my astonishment, Li Xiao was on the phone, bellowing with rage. His face flushed and neck taut, while shattered porcelain lay scattered across the floor. "I don't care what methods you employ. I want that old man of the Liu family bankrupt. Immediately. Right now." The Liu family? My mind was ablaze with commentary. Here it comes. The villain's usual antics to bring down the protagonist's family. Poor male lead, forced to endure the malice of the antagonist at such a tender age. This father's temper is explosive. How could the female supporting character expect to lead a good life alongside him? I shrank back, realizing that this cheap father was indeed not to be trifled with. Before I could fully digest the shock from that scene, another disturbance arose. From my cheap mother's room, Wei Lan, came a series of dull thuds, akin to someone banging their head against the wall. A faint metallic scent wafted through the crack of the door, causing my heart to lurch. The commentary resumed. The gloomy little white flower mother is having one of her episodes. She could easily fall into despair with the weather, let alone knowing her husband is up to no good. The female supporting character must be dumbfounded now. One is moody, the other prone to self-harm. How will she manage? I find myself somewhat sympathetic to this cannon fodder female character, just escaping the wolf's den only to enter the tiger's lair. Sympathy for me? Not necessary. Ji Tang, am determined to lead my villainous parents towards a life of prosperity. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself. There was no need to panic. My father and mother harbored within them a child in need of love, just like me. Those malicious comments knew nothing. I dashed back to my room, rummaging through my small backpack to retrieve a plump, red apple, and pilfered a roll of gauze from the medicine cabinet. First, I needed to attend to my mother. I knocked on Wei Lan's door. Mommy, open the door. It's Tang Tang. After a considerable wait, the door cracked open. Wei Lan's face was as pale as paper, beads of sweat glistening on her forehead, and, as expected, there were fresh scratches on her wrist. I pretended not to notice, holding up the apple with a bright and innocent smile. Mommy, I want to eat an apple, but shaped like a little rabbit. Wei Lan stared at me blankly, then glanced at the apple in my hand, a flicker of confusion passing through her eyes, though the oppressive aura surrounding her seemed to lighten slightly. She silently accepted the apple and the fruit knife. In no time, a little rabbit-shaped apple appeared before me. I must admit, her hands were quite skillful. Taking the rabbit apple, I bit into it with delight. Wei Lan watched me with a slowly curving smile at the corners of her mouth. Tang Tang, what do you want for lunch today? She asked softly, her voice still hoarse. The opportunity had arrived. I immediately rattled off my requests: sweet and sour pork, hand-torn chicken, sweet and sour ribs, spicy fish, and, oh, I want strawberry cake. Wei Lan seemed a bit dazed by my long list. Yet she took out a small notebook and diligently wrote it down. Give me 2 hours, she said, a glimmer of light returning to her eyes. She casually grabbed the gauze I had brought and wrapped it clumsily around her wrist, managing to staunch the bleeding, before turning to head to the kitchen. Watching her retreating figure, I exhaled in relief. Excellent, the first step was a success. As long as there was something for her to do, she wouldn't have time to dwell on dark thoughts. Next, it was time to deal with my cheap father. With utmost caution, I knocked on the study door.
Come in.
Li Xiao's voice was still tinged with anger. I pushed the door open, peeking my head in. The study was in disarray, papers strewn across the floor. Li Xiao sat behind the desk, his face dark and fingers tapping irritably on the surface. According to the commentary, his prolonged opposition to the protagonist's family would lead to neglecting the management of his company, ultimately resulting in bankruptcy and the family being cast onto the streets. I had no desire to live such a life. I shook my head, casting those dreadful thoughts aside. Then, I pulled out from behind my back my prized possession, a crumpled political exam paper marked with a glaring red 6 in the upper right corner. I blinked innocently, extending it toward him with a pitiful expression. Daddy, the teacher wants a parent as signature. Li Xiao glanced at it with impatience. Out of 10? I shook my head, whispering, out of 100. The air instantly thickened. Li Xiao's expression transformed from annoyance to shock, and then to a furious glare, all within 3 seconds.
What
did you say? He nearly spat through clenched teeth. I was first in my entire school, granted direct admission. You're telling me you scored 6 in politics. That paper, if dropped on the floor and stepped on, would score higher. His forehead was pulsing with rage, yet he took the paper, signing his name with a flourish, likely out of fear of collapsing from anger. Seizing a moment, I gazed at him with watery eyes, my voice quivering. Daddy, the teacher said that if I score above 90, I can earn a little red flower. With my woeful demeanor, even Li Xiao's wrath had to be stifled. He sighed deeply, his tone resigned. How about I make you 100 little red flowers? I shook my head firmly, maintaining a gaze that seemed to ask, do you not love me, Daddy? Li Xiao sighed again, as if resigning himself to fate. Hand me the book. I promptly placed the pristine textbook, Moral and Legal Education, respectfully in his hands. Indeed, both of them became engrossed in their tasks. My mother, Weilon, once a renowned culinary master, had signed up for 5 cooking classes to satisfy my culinary desires, vowing to master the 4 major Chinese cuisines alongside Western desserts in no time. My father, Li Xiao, a man teetering on the edge of crime, was reluctantly drawn into the noble endeavor of tutoring me, aiming to master the moral and legal education knowledge from elementary school to university in the shortest time possible. As I observed the two of them, one deep in thought over recipes, the other pulling his hair out over textbooks, I couldn't help but smile with maternal pride. Keeping busy was good. It kept them from causing trouble. My plan for transformation was beginning to bear fruit. A seemingly happy family, on the surface tranquil, was, in fact, teeming with undercurrents. Especially with my pair of cheap parents, whose relationship was a perfect facade. That evening there was a business banquet. My father, Li Xiao, had dressed himself impeccably in a sharp suit, hair meticulously styled, exuding an air of authority. My mother, Weilon, rarely donned a beautiful evening gown, even selecting a matching princess dress for me, transforming me into a little doll. Hand in hand, the 3 of us entered the banquet hall, and one might mistake us for a model family. However, as soon as we stepped inside, whispers erupted around us. I could feel my mother, Weilon, gripping my hand tighter unconsciously. She had always detested these superficial gatherings. The commentary chimed in. The villainous couple is in a business marriage with 0 emotional foundation. Li Xia, unable to pursue his white moonlight, was forced to marry Weilon. Weilon had harbored a crush on her childhood sweetheart for years, only to watch him fall for the white moonlight, leaving her in despair. TSK, the upper crust is truly chaotic. Good heavens, the complexity of these relationships rivaled that of a melodramatic soap opera. Usually, their surface-level interactions were passable, with neither party encroaching on the other's territory. However, it just so happened that the protagonist's parents, namely Lu Xiuyuan's father and mother, also attended this banquet. This certainly stirred up quite a commotion. The barrage of comments erupted instantaneously. Ahead, a battlefield. The protagonist's parents are in the control group. One can only imagine the embarrassment the antagonistic couple will face at the banquet. A villain is a villain. They can't help but create chaos for a single day. Warning of high energy ahead. The madcap antagonist Li Xiao is about to pull out a drug from his suit pocket, preparing to target the moonlight. Truly wicked to the core. My heart sank. Drugging. This simply wouldn't do. If my father truly committed such an act, he would land in prison. I could not allow any mishap to befall my parents. I discreetly cast a glance at my father. Indeed, his eyes were bloodshot, fixated on the protagonist's mother, who was chatting and laughing not far away. His left hand instinctively pressed against the inner pocket of his suit, while his right hand held a cocktail with a drinking posture that resembled one imbibing poison. Brimming with deep-seated hatred. This was dire. I quickly released my mother's hand and, like an eel, nimbly weaved through the crowd. Seizing the moment when no one was paying attention, I tugged at my father's sleeve and softly said, "Dad, I'm thirsty. I would like some juice." Simultaneously, my other hand swiftly reached for his suit pocket. To my surprise, I indeed touched a small packet of powdered substance. Goodness, he was serious. Taking advantage of his unawareness, I quickly tucked the packet into my pocket and pulled him toward the buffet table. "Dad, I want that and that." I pointed at a myriad of colorful desserts, successfully diverting his attention. Just as I racked my brain, pondering how to discreetly dispose of this ticking time bomb, an unexpected incident occurred. As I was attempting to pour the powder into a corner trash can, a figure suddenly rushed over. My hand trembled, and, by sheer coincidence, most of the powder spilled into a glass on a passing waiter's tray. A small portion, even scattered on me. I froze. "You?" A boy about my height stood before me, his expression indifferent, yet his gaze brimmed with curiosity, staring intently at the empty bag in my hand and the spiked drink before him. This was truly an embarrassing social disaster. Thinking quickly, I covered his mouth and whispered menacingly, "You mustn't say a word. Pretend you didn't see anything." Then, I pulled out a handful of candy I had just pilfered and stuffed it into his hands, murmuring, "Hush, money." My heart ached. This was candy I had painstakingly saved up. I was just about to tip over that spiked drink, pretending it was an accident. However, my fatherly Shao, sharp-eyed,
spotted me.
He strode over and scooped me up into his arms, casually grabbing the spiked drink from the waiter's tray. My daughter is so thoughtful. Even bringing me a drink. He downed it in one gulp. I was left speechless. I felt so guilty, I nearly fainted on the spot.
"Dad.
You truly are a wonderful father." I hurriedly slipped from his embrace and ran to find my mother, Wei Lan. "Mom, it seems Dad has had too much to drink and wants to return to the room to rest." I spoke with utmost seriousness. "Don't wander off. I'll take him to the room and come find you," Wei Lan instructed. I obediently nodded, finding a corner seat to sit down, pretending to be a quiet lady. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the boy I had bribed earlier. He was surrounded by 2 or 3 taller boys, seemingly being bullied.
"Hey."
My temper flared. In my youth, I was the undisputed leader of the orphanage. I detest such scenes of bullying. I rolled up my princess dress sleeves and marched toward them with fierce determination. To my surprise, as soon as the bullying boys saw me, they screamed as if they had seen a ghost and fled in tears. I stood there, bewildered. Am I really that frightening? I touched my cheek. It was soft and tender, undeniably cute. I poked the rescued boy's face. He frowned slightly and uttered 3 words. "Xin. Well, that's rather cool." I immediately introduced myself enthusiastically. "I am Ji Tang, 8 years old, and I can sing and dance. My mom and dad." Just as I was about to boast about my parents' illustrious accomplishments, Xin seemed disinterested, his eyes downcast, and he languidly muttered another word, "sleepy." As a commendable young pioneer eager to help, I naturally resolved to see this through. I skipped along behind him to his room. He gestured several times with his eyes, indicating I could leave, but I pretended not to understand. "Boys and girls should not share a bed," I said earnestly. "But since you seem so reluctant to part with me, I will begrudgingly agree." Then, disregarding his startled expression, akin to one who had seen a ghost, I snuggled up to him like I would with my beloved teddy bear, contentedly closing my eyes and drifting into a peaceful slumber. Yet as I dozed off, vague thoughts flickered through my mind. What had my mother Wei Lan asked me to do earlier? Something about waiting for her? Never mind. It doesn't matter. My head feels like it's shutting down. Sleep is paramount. At that moment, the barrage in my mind began to spring back to life. The foolish female supporting character always provokes the antagonist. Look at this unformed child beside her, truly a candidate for the antagonist's reserve. Still, let us spare a thought for the protagonists. They never encounter good fortune when facing the antagonists. However, the antagonist brought the drug on themselves. Will the original plot still unfold? In the original storyline, Tomorrow would be the day the antagonist faces disgrace, as he forcibly claims another's wife and is sent to prison. I was jolted awake. Early the next morning, rubbing my sleepy eyes, I finally recalled the shocking revelation from the previous night's barrage. This was not good. I barely had time to put on my shoes, rushing barefoot toward my parents' room. Sure enough, a crowd had gathered outside, each person brandishing cameras and flashes like cats drawn to the scent of blood, eager to capture the antagonist's scandal. Leading the charge was none other than the protagonist Lu Shuyuan's father, his face contorted with anger as he pounded on the door. The occupants inside made no move to open. Just as the situation reached a critical point, the door clicked open. A throng of reporters widened their eyes, ready to capture the explosive scene. To my astonishment, my father Li Xiao emerged disheveled, his hair in disarray and a suspicious flush adorning his face. Even more shocking, a small head peeked out behind him. It was my mother Wei Lan, her face tinged with a hint of shyness and a touch of sleepiness. A weight lifted from my heart, though it quickly returned. What had those two done last night? My wife and I were in our own room. What do you think you are doing? Trespassing? My father's voice resonated with a palpable threat as his sharp gaze swept over the reporters. The reporters exchanged bewildered glances, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. Realizing they could not snag a headline and might invite trouble instead, they scurried away, faster than rabbits. The protagonist, Lu Shuyuan's father, my mother's former crush, cast a wary glance into the room, his expression complex, before he too departed in a huff. As soon as my mother Wei Lan emerged, she spotted me and came over, pinching my ear with a hint of concern in her tone. "Where have you been all night, you child?" My eyes darted around, and I immediately concocted a fib. I went to assist the weak. A young gentleman was being bullied, and I could not stand idly by, so I intervened with valor. I am quite the benevolent soul. My parents exchanged a glance, clearly skeptical of my tall tale. However, seeing that I was neither maimed nor wronged, they refrained from further inquiries and hurriedly whisked me away from that troublesome place. In the car, the barrage of comments resumed in full swing. The villainous couple didn't have a fallout. Instead, their relationship seems to be flourishing. What sorcery is this? The supporting female character has some potential, albeit limited. Villains are merely stepping stones. This time, their success is sheer luck. Given the villain's infatuation with the protagonist, it's only a matter of time before they face a downfall. I clenched my tiny fists in indignation. They were no nefarious villains. They were my beloved parents. Humph. In pursuit of providing me with a superior education, my parents insisted on enrolling me in the city's most prestigious elite school. Despite my best efforts to throw tantrums, feign illness, and employ every possible charm to sway their decision, I could not counter my father's nonchalant decree. I believe it would be prudent to entrust her studies to professional educators. For someone who prides himself on his intellect and was once the top student in his school, my father's lament was, in a sense, a testament to my own capabilities. Although the elite school boasted exquisite meals, gentle teachers, and timely dismissals, the glaring truth remained. Both the male and female leads, Lu Shuyuan and Lu Yan, were also attending this institution. My presence there would undoubtedly position me as mere fodder, a pawn in their grand narrative. I clung to my father's leg, attempting to soften his heart with tears. To no avail. I turned to my mother, Wei Lan, who merely handed me a beautifully packaged box of cookies, gently instructing me to share them with my new classmates. Indeed, once my father made a decision, it was as immutable as fate. I could only silently pray that I would not be placed in the same class as the protagonists. To my astonishment, my father waved his hand grandly and donated 2 academic buildings to the school. Consequently, I found myself fortunate enough to be assigned to the top-tier class of the entire grade. Oh, dear father, there was truly no need for such extravagance. Thus, on the very first day of school, I stood at the podium, clutching the box of cookies my mother had given me, locking eyes with the male and female leads seated below. The atmosphere became palpably awkward. At last, the moment of chaos has arrived. The supporting character is about to stir trouble again. According to the plot, she will distribute cookies to the leads, only for the female lead to discover she is allergic to wheat, resulting in the male lead developing a distaste for the supporting character. The supporting female character is merely a catalyst for the protagonist's burgeoning romance, a confirmed tool. Enraged, I yearned to hurl the cookie box at them, letting them experience the bitter taste of physical catalysis. The teacher permitted us to choose our seats. I promptly abandoned the self-destructive position that would lead me to the protagonist's vicinity. Instead, I cast my gaze towards the last row of the classroom, where a boy was resting his head on his desk, sound asleep by the window. Wasn't he this the cool guy I had bribed at the banquet, Zhen Huichuan? What a twist of fate. He was rudely awakened by his desk mate, lifting his eyelids to glance at me with an expression that screamed, "Who are you? Please do not disturb my slumber." I smiled broadly and approached him, placing the box of cookies with a loud thud on his desk. "For you," I proclaimed with grandiosity. Then, I gazed at him with a woeful expression, desperately attempting to convey a silent plea. "Please accept this, or I shall face dire consequences." He furrowed his brow, scrutinizing me and the cookie box, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Are you offering me a gift, or are you attempting to send me away?"
Oh.
He possessed quite the sense of humor. The comments resumed flooding in. Is the supporting character some sort of villain magnet? To pinpoint a villain among dozens is a rare skill indeed. I, Ji Tang, am the most loyal ally of the villains. Thus, in the days that followed, I became Zhen Huichuan's devoted sidekick. When the villain enjoyed cookies, I wiped his mouth. When the villain napped, I fanned him. When the villain went to the restroom, well, I refrained from intruding. He firmly insisted, "No need for that. Just step outside." Quite the pity. After a long day of bustling about, I ultimately succeeded in escorting my villainous desk mate to the school infirmary. The reason was simple. He had consumed the cookies I had gifted him and subsequently suffered a rather dramatic allergic reaction. I anxiously trailed beside Zhen Huichuan, who remained surprisingly composed. Apart from a slight flush to his cheeks and slightly labored breathing, he appeared largely untroubled. The nurse regarded him with mild reproach. "Young man, didn't you know you were allergic to wheat? Why consume so many cookies?" He needed 2 bags of 4 fluid. I felt overwhelming guilt, repeatedly apologizing to Zhen Huichuan. Yet, he waved it off casually, his voice hoarse from the allergy but earnest nonetheless. "I truly enjoyed the gift you gave me." Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he added, "This is the first time I've ever received a gift." I barely caught his words, but the comments filled in for him. Oh my, the little villain's contradictory nature is so endearing, I feel like switching sides. Does the little villain genuinely harbor feelings for the original female lead, Lu Yan? Their interactions with a supporting character, Ji Tang, seem far more intriguing. Dismantling couples is utterly detestable. Pay attention to your stance, commenters. The comments buzzed incessantly. I, however, found solace in the notion that I could steer the future great villain away from the tragic romance of the original story, allowing him to focus on being a carefree slacker instead. I felt a sense of gratification. Yet, such bliss was fleeting. The original female lead, Lu Yan, approached me, her eyes red-rimmed and on the verge of tears, accusing me of stealing her once happy life. I pointed to myself. "Me? The one whom you scorned as part of the villain's family? Dear lady, it seems you have miscalculated." As Lu Yan continued her accusations, dabbing at her tears, each word struck a painful chord reminiscent of her disdain for my parents during our time at the orphanage. A throng of students passing by were drawn to the commotion, captivated by our exchange. Many, not fully grasping the situation, rushed to comfort the tearful Lu Yan while directing their ire towards me, accusing me of bullying the weak. I was furious. "Are you all blind?" I exclaimed, gesturing to the distance between Lu Yan and myself. "I'm at least 3 feet away from her. Not even a hair's breadth can touch her." Yet, the onlookers were often oblivious, believing only what they wished to believe. Thus, I found myself isolated by my entire class. My unfortunate desk mate, Zhen Huichuan, suffered the same fate. No one dared to speak to him. No matter. I still had my cookies. I relished the moments during lunch, basking in the sunlight, munching on cookies while admiring the handsome boys. Our school as heartthrob, the original male lead Lu Shuyuan, particularly enjoyed playing basketball during lunch. The basketball court was conveniently aligned with my line of sight. Pure coincidence, truly. Then, new rumors began to circulate. "Have you heard? Ji Tang has a crush on the school heartthrob, Lu Shuyuan." How shameless. Stringing 2 boys along. I feel pity for Zhen Huichuan. Who would have guessed Ji Tang was so wicked, bullying Lu Yan, only to covet her boyfriend? What in the world was happening? What had I, Ji Tang, done to deserve this? Even Zhen Huichuan's gaze towards me shifted, tinged with confusion. The most immediate consequence was that my hard-earned lunch companion suddenly vanished, choosing to avoid me. I could not endure this. After school, I intercepted Zhen Huichuan right at the school gate, seizing his collar and fiercely demanding, "Why are you avoiding me?" Perhaps my actions were too forceful, as a button on a school uniform shirt popped off with a loud snap, flying away. The lunchbox he was holding also tumbled to the ground with a thud, spilling its contents everywhere. Sin Huichuan tugged at the corners of his mouth, his expression remaining indifferent. Yet his tone betrayed a hint of unnoticeable grievance. If your heart belongs to another, why seek me out? I was perplexed. Do you believe the rumors? You hardly know me. I lamented, in my heart. All I think about are fried chicken, roast duck, hamburgers, fries, and pizza. I casually pointed at Sin Huichuan's exposed chest, and his brow slightly relaxed. Then, in a flash, he snatched the lunchbox from my hands. Let's eat together. His words were succinct and to the point. Well then. My lunch companion was restored. As the last and second to last in our class, Sin Huichuan and I were walking further down the path of infamy, successfully locking ourselves into our roles. Soon, the parent-teacher meeting arrived. My father, Li Xiao, managed to carve out time from his busy schedule to attend. Coincidentally, the mother of the male protagonist, Lu Shuyuan, who is also Lu Yan's adoptive mother, was present. What a spectacle, villains meeting the beloved light of the story. Like thunder clashing with lightning. I had no intention of entangling myself in their adult grievances. I dragged Sin Huichuan to the playground to swing, while simultaneously monitoring the chaotic events of the parent-teacher meeting through the barrage of comments in my mind. As expected, the comments surged. The villain is up to no good again. Li Xiao has the top student from the White Moonlight family tutor his failing daughter. In reality, he wants to get closer to the White Moonlight. Sinister intentions. The entire villain family is filled with malice. Not a single good person among them. The protagonist couple has been loving each other for half their lives, only to have their home torn apart by the villain. How tragic. I felt a surge of emotions and exclaimed, I certainly don't want Lu Shuyuan to tutor me. Sin Huichuan silently pushed my swing beside me, suddenly clenching his fists and muttering, I can tutor you too. I nearly toppled off the swing in delight, bursting into laughter. The second to last is going to tutor the last? What a brotherhood of misfortune. Sin Huichuan, somewhat embarrassed by my teasing, retorted, You don't believe in me? I honestly nodded. Well, if you can rank first in the class next time, I'll convince my dad to hire you as my tutor. Unbeknownst to me, my light-hearted words resonated with deeper implications. As the parent-teacher meeting neared its conclusion, my father, Li Xiao, indeed approached Lu Shuyuan's mother. His expression tinged with a sense of reluctance that suggested the remnants of a narrative-driven emotional arc still flickered within him. Realizing the situation was precarious, I hurriedly pulled Sin Huichuan toward them, positioning him in front of Lu Shuyuan's mother before my father could speak, and began to lavish praise. Hello, Auntie. This is my desk mate, Sin Huichuan. He excels academically, ranking first in the class. He is handsome, kind-hearted, eager to help, uniting his classmates, and embodies comprehensive development in all aspects. I employed every eloquent phrase at my disposal to exalt Sin Huichuan, elevating him to celestial heights while simultaneously dragging Lu Shuyuan into the mud. After all, the comments had previously disparaged us villains, so it was only fair to reciprocate. Sin Huichuan's face turned crimson, probably having never received such accolades before. Lu Shuyuan's mother was momentarily taken aback by my performance. Just then, the original female protagonist, Lu Yan, appeared from nowhere, tears streaming down her face as she dove into Lu Shuyuan's mother's embrace, sobbing as if she had endured a great injustice. Lu Shuyuan's mother was immediately overwhelmed with maternal affection, deeply moved by Lu Yan's resilience. She tenderly patted Lu Yan's back and then turned to my father, her tone laced with a touch of arrogance and provocation. Mr. Li, you once deemed our Lu Yan unworthy and refused to take her in.
Now,
I will formally adopt her as my goddaughter. She will henceforth be a member of the Lu family. The comments erupted once more. Truly the righteous couple. Kind and gentle. So touching. The villain couple looked down on our little heroine, truly blind. They deserve it. Witnessing such a beautiful scene moved me to shed 2 crocodile tears. I could hardly contain my laughter. Crocodile tears? What a perfect description. And how fickle the comments were. Lu Yan had previously scorned my parents for being villains, and now she was lamenting that they hadn't taken her in? Double standards at play. Just because one is labeled the protagonist, does it mean they must be a pristine lily? My father, Li Xiao, the quintessential domineering CEO, turned pale at the scene. It was likely that Lu Shuyuan's mother's boastful attitude, flaunting the worthless trash he had discarded, had incensed him. The final flicker of his hope was likely extinguished by this farce. I excitedly high-fived Sin Huichuan. Perfect assist. Little did I know, a week later, a more explosive piece of news arrived. The upright protagonists, Lu Shiyuan's family, had moved in next door to my villa. What is this? This is what one might call not enemies, yet not friends. Our new neighbors brought over a housewarming gift. My mother, Wei Lan, accepted the present, her gaze lingering on Lu Shiyuan's father for several seconds. My heart sank. It seemed that the influence of her childhood crush, Lu Shiyuan's father, had not yet fully dissipated. It was no wonder my mother felt this way. According to my grandparents, my mother was particularly introverted and shy as a child, and her childhood companion, Lu Shiyuan's father, would always come to walk with her to and from school. What a beautiful scene, riding bamboo horses and playing around the courtyard with green plums. Until one day, my mother took a shortcut home and encountered a group of delinquents who robbed her. Despite having learned taekwondo and jiu-jitsu from a young age, she was no match for multiple assailants and was kicked once, losing all the money in her backpack. Coincidentally, her childhood companion happened to pass by and quickly dispatched the thugs, retrieving her money in the process. A classic case of hero rescuing the damsel. Thus, the bridge effect took hold. My mother's youthful heart was utterly captivated. From then on, she pursued her childhood companion relentlessly, only to face heartbreak time and again. Alas, what is love but a tumultuous affair that leads to life and death? It is all a curse. My dismal exam scores fell like a continuous drizzle, pattering down on every relative who cared for me. Even my mother, Wei Lan, who had previously been indifferent to my academic performance, showing only concern for whether I was fed and clothed, now bore an expression of disbelief. The two high-achieving graduates from prestigious universities were plunged into deep despair upon facing my test paper, which was so low it could be trampled underfoot. Perhaps we should seek out that child from the Lu family next door for tutoring? My mother suggested tentatively. I immediately bristled. Not a chance. My father, Li Xiao, surprisingly stood on my side. No way. Tang's deskmate, Xin Huichuan, also has excellent grades. The teacher praised him at the last parent-teacher meeting. Let that kid tutor her. It was then that I realized my previous boast at the parent-teacher meeting had backfired. My mother, Wei Lan, hesitated a moment before ultimately deciding, then let Xin Huichuan start tutoring Tang next week. She even provided a backup plan that if Xin Huichuan didn't work out, I would have to resort to Lu Xiuyuan. With no other options, I secretly messaged Xin Huichuan for help. Tang, emergency. This is urgent. Can you rank first in the class on the next exam? Taking on a visage of cold sweat, Tang, my parents want you to be my tutor. You must disguise yourself well. Under no circumstances must they discover that you, too, are a slacker. Huichuan, understood. Tang, hey, you better not do anything foolish, like cheating on exams. I certainly do not wish to find myself in a tearful prison. Huichuan, trust me. A head pat emoji. I wish I could trust him. However, his abilities do not permit such faith. I can only devise every possible way to buy time. At the very least, if I can delay for a day, that would suffice. My parents love me dearly. Surely they wouldn't resort to extreme measures just because I score a 0, right? The final exams concluded. The following day, the results were released. I gazed at the report card, where the top position boldly bore the name Xin Huichuan, while the last position stubbornly displayed my own name, Ji Tang. I leaned closer to Xin Huichuan and whispered in a voice only we could hear, "Hey, no matter what, you cannot cheat. If we get caught, we're both doomed." Xin Huichuan chuckled softly, ruffling my hair, his tone light. I didn't cheat, rest assured. Indeed, it was as I had suspected. The entire class, including our homeroom teacher, found it hard to believe that Xin Huichuan had achieved first place. He was taken aside for a discussion and was asked to complete a more challenging supplementary test on the spot. The outcome was still near perfect scores across the board. At this juncture, everyone fell silent. He returned to his seat with a beaming smile, once again ruffling my hair, announcing, "Starting next week, I will tutor you at your home." I was furious. We had agreed to be a pair of lazy fish. Why was he secretly working hard and astonishing everyone? Meanwhile, I was still floundering. Under pressure, I reluctantly accepted the reality of Xin Huichuan becoming my tutor. To be fair, he truly embodied the persona of an academic overachiever, effortlessly charming my parents with a few well-placed words, leaving them utterly satisfied and eagerly pushing us to retreat to my room to study diligently. As soon as we entered my room, I jumped up and gave him a nudge. "Speak. Have you been secretly studying all along? We agreed to be slackers together. How could you betray the cause?" Sin Hui Chuan stumbled back slightly, a hint of grievance flickering across his face. I couldn't just stand by and watch Lu Shiyuan tutor you, could I? He mumbled softly. I pondered for a moment. He did have a point. However, I was entirely unaware of the faint scent of jealousy that seemed to permeate the air. Just then, my mother, Wailon, entered with a plate of cut fruit. Her eyes were red, as if she had just been crying. Tang tang. The aunt from our neighbor's house has been kidnapped, your father. My heart sank, and realization dawned upon me. It must be Lu Shiyuan's father. Believing my father, Li Xiao, was responsible, causing a scene at my father's company. Now, the entrance to my father's company was likely swarmed by media and police. The comment section erupted once again, a classic plot twist. The antagonist only serves to obstruct the male lead's family. As long as the male lead asks for her help, Wailon, this lovesick fool, will undoubtedly send Li Xiao straight to jail. Pure love warrior versus business marriage, the genuine feelings of this couple forever directed toward outsiders. Doesn't anyone think the protagonists in this novel have been endowed with an excessively grand halo? They depict the antagonist's entire family as utterly foolish. I wholeheartedly concur with the latter sentiment. My mother, Wailon, was clearly distressed out of concern for my father, not for that ungrateful childhood friend. Initially, my mother had her heart set on marrying her childhood friend, Lu Shiyuan's father. My grandfather was even willing to part with 20% of the company's shares as a dowry, should he agree to marry my mother. What happened instead? That ungrateful scoundrel got engaged, accepted the shares, but on the eve of the wedding, informed my mother that he had found his true love, Lu Shiyuan's mother. At that time, Lu Shiyuan's father had just been embroiled in a family power struggle, cast out with nothing to his name. My mother, being compassionate, held on to her concern for him, not reclaiming the dowry or shares. Truly, it was a case of losing both husband and fortune, a double loss. By the time my mother, Wailon, and I hurried to my father, Li Xiao's company, the entrance was indeed a chaotic scene. Reporters, police, and onlookers surrounded it in layers. Lu Shiyuan's father, Lu Chengyuan, pointed at the company entrance, indignantly shouting at my mother, Wailon. You must have Li Xiao return my wife. My mother, Wailon, turned pale, her body trembling slightly. Clearly reluctant to believe the situation. We managed to squeeze into the company, where my father, Li Xiao, sat in his executive chair, smoking one cigarette after another. The office clouded in smoke. His typically arrogant features were now marred by fatigue and weariness. What brings you here? He asked, surprised at our arrival. I have located the site of Li Shuyi's kidnapping. He extinguished his cigarette, rising to his feet. After all, she is my sister. Without another glance at my mother, he hurriedly departed. I sensed my mother, Wailon's gaze dimming. Li Shuyi was Lu Shiyuan's mother, my father Li Xiao's nominal adopted sister. She had long exploited my father's subtle, unrequited affection for her, indulging in art studies, studying abroad, and traveling the world at her leisure. Yet, whenever my father broached the subject of marriage, she would promptly invoke the we are family rhetoric, vehemently opposing the idea, even claiming my father harbored feelings for his sister, which repulsed her. And what was the outcome? During the busiest time at my father's company, when he needed support the most, she abruptly married her true love, Lu Chengyuan, in a flash wedding. My father nearly fell into despair, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy with the company. It was only through his marriage to my mother, Wailon, who had also suffered emotional betrayal, that he managed to salvage the situation. Today, under my father's leadership, the Li Corporation flourishes, far surpassing the Lu Corporation by several streets. Were it not for my father's and mother's naive generosity, the protagonist couple's company would have collapsed countless times. My mother, Wailon, gently patted my head, advising me to accompany Sin Hui Chuan back to his home to avoid getting entangled in this chaotic mess. She chose to remain behind to safeguard the company against any unexpected developments. As for my father, Li Xiao, he was aboard a helicopter, heading towards a remote strait. The comment section began a new round of predictions. The final scene. The antagonist couple shall inevitably become stepping stones on the protagonist couple's path to success. Their company will be swallowed whole, and they will ultimately perish at the hands of the kidnappers. Poor supporting character Ji Tang. Not only will she be seen as a harbinger of bad luck, but she will also inadvertently miss her college entrance exams, living a life of poverty and despair. And what of the antagonist, Sin Hui Chuan? He will relentlessly pursue the original female lead, Lu Yan, only to be met with unrequited love, pining for her throughout his life. The cyclical nature of fate is truly remarkable. I scoffed. How could they play it this way?
Yiten.
Refused to be bound by such a fate. Sen Huaichuan, at my mother's behest, came to deliver a change of pajamas. I looked at him, my eyes suddenly lighting up, and I leapt into his embrace, accidentally knocking the pajamas from his hands.
Sen Huaichuan.
How about embarking on an impromptu adventure? Sen Huaichuan staggered back a step, steadying himself, and looked at me with a hint of confusion. Where to? I grasped his hand, speaking with an air of mystery. To the ends of the earth. To rescue my two lovesick parents. His ears subtly turned red. I pretended not to notice. Thus, Sen Huaichuan was coaxed and deceived by me into embarking on a rescue journey to a remote island known as Tianya Haijiao. Upon our arrival, the kidnappers were engaged in a heated yet cordial negotiation over the ransom with my father, Li Xiao. Meanwhile, Lu Chengyuan, the husband of Li Shuyi, stood by like a timid turtle, too afraid to utter a word. My father, believing the terms had been settled, was poised to approach the kidnappers with a suitcase filled with ransom money. Suddenly, one of the assailants glinted with malice in his eyes, lunging forward with a sharp dagger aimed directly at my father. Watch out. I instinctively leapt forward, only to be yanked back by Sen Huaichuan, who shielded me tightly in his embrace. At that moment, Lu Chengyuan, who had been standing close to my father, vanished in the blink of an eye, fleeing faster than a monkey. Li Shuyi could only scream for my father's help in desperation. Blood flowed profusely as the blade pierced through, staining my father's shirt crimson. The once proud and imperious president of the Li Corporation now knelt on one knee, clutching his wound in agony. The kidnappers, emboldened by their success, prepared to further their attack and eliminate my father entirely. Just as the situation grew dire, the sound of a helicopter roared closer. My mother, Wei Lan, clad in a sharp white outfit, descended gracefully from the ropes, landing firmly on the ground. Upon seeing my father collapsed, her eyes welled with tears.
Li Xiao.
You must stay alive. My usually gentle mother, known for her soft-spoken demeanor, transformed into a fierce warrior, unleashing her long-dormant taekwondo skills, striking the kidnappers with precision and power, leaving them in disarray. However, a couple of persistent assailants remained undeterred. One took advantage of my mother's distraction, stealthily retrieving a dagger from the ground, intending to ambush her from behind. Mom, be careful. I could not help but exclaim. My father, summoning his last ounce of strength, yanked my mother behind him, using his own body to absorb the deadly blow. Another strike followed, and blood gushed forth. The atmosphere froze momentarily before erupting with frantic comments. What the hell? Isn't this scene supposed to feature the villain shielding the female lead? Why has the role reversed? Am I seeing this correctly? The crazy villain is actually taking a knife for the gloomy flower? Why do I find this oddly satisfying? Am I losing my mind? If the villain doesn't step back in this episode, the plot will be thrown into chaos. Ultimately, both protagonists were rescued unharmed, while my villainous parents faced dire consequences. One fell into a coma, teetering on the brink of death. The other, though conscious, bore severe injuries with several gashes marring their body. My father, Li Xiao, was rushed into the ICU for emergency treatment, while my mother, Wei Lan, hobbled into the adjacent ward for care, her forehead bandaged thickly. Observing her disoriented expression, I approached and gently grasped her hand, whispering words of comfort. Mom, don't be upset. Dad doesn't truly have feelings for his adopted sister.
Li Shuyi.
You two are the real couple. My mother, Wei Lan, bowed her head, tears trickling down to her hand, her voice choked with emotion. Tang Tang. I was mistaken about who saved me in that alley all those years ago. It wasn't Lu Chengyuan, it was your father, Li Xiao. I was taken aback. It turned out that in that school, within the same class, the wheels of fate had subtly misaligned from the very beginning. The one who saved my mother was the quiet, unremarkable boy in class, my father. Meanwhile, her so-called childhood sweetheart, Lu Chengyuan, had shown no concern for her ordeal. And thus she had been misled for years. Such are the whims of fate. My mother, trembling, prepared chicken soup and carefully brought it to the intensive care unit. The once mighty and imposing Li Xiao now lay frail on the hospital bed, his complexion pale as paper, with a few glaring white hairs emerging at his temples. Li Xiao, do you know how long I've searched for you? My mother, Wei Lan, gazed at him, her eyes glistening with tears. My father, Li Xiao, slowly opened his eyes, gazing at my mother beside him, his expression laden with complex emotions, and choked up. Wei Lan, do you know that I've been searching for you for a very long time? It turned out that during my mother's childhood, One summer, while visiting her grandmother in the countryside, she had encountered a neighbor boy who was in the throes of shyness. At that time, their families were neighbors, but had little interaction. My mother, fond of wearing a white dress, would skip past the neighbor's house daily, occasionally picking dew-kissed wildflowers to secretly place in the neighbor's mailbox. The neighbor boy, who was none other than my father, Li Xiao, eagerly awaited the sight of the little girl in her white dress and straw hat, humming cheerful tunes. She became his sole bright spot during a dark and difficult period. Later, Li Shui, also wearing a white dress and sharing the Li surname, appeared as an adopted daughter in the Li family, occasionally giving my father the illusion that she was the girl he had met in the countryside. Meanwhile, my mother, due to her childhood companion Lu Chengyuan's aversion to her wearing skirts, particularly her beloved white dress, never donned it again. Thus, the wheels of destiny turned in a twisted manner. During my father's hospitalization, the Lu Corporation, like a ravenous beast sensing blood, sought to seize a piece of the weakened Li Corporation. They spread malicious rumors through the media, claiming that the president, Li Xiao, was in critical condition, leaving the company without leadership and forcing his wife, Wei Lan, who had never been involved in corporate affairs, into a position of command. Panic ensued both within and outside the company, causing the stock market to fluctuate violently. Even at school, I heard various rumors swirling around. The original female lead, Lu Yan, had risen in status since becoming a member of the Lu family, and those who previously sought to curry favor with her became even more obsequious. Meanwhile, I had become the target of disdain among my peers. Coincidentally, during this time, Xin Huichuan was on an extended leave due to family matters, absent from school. Those who would typically refrain from provoking me now reveled in my misfortune. "Hey, Ji Tang, I heard your family is on the verge of bankruptcy. Here, let me give you a cookie brought back from Switzerland by my dad. You probably won't be able to afford such luxury anymore." A classmate, who regularly flaunted his wealth, tossed a cookie onto my desk, his tone dripping with disdain. "Tang Tang, is it true that your family is really going bankrupt? I've heard that poor people carry a sour smell. Why do I feel like you have it now?" A former friend held her nose and exaggeratedly stepped back several paces, then screamed as she fled. I paid them no mind. They were merely a band of foolish jesters. Even my homeroom teacher summoned me to the office, probing delicately into my family's situation.
Zitang.
"You must understand that the tuition at our elite school is quite substantial. Can your family still afford it?" I pressed my lips together and replied coolly, "Rest assured, teacher. The tuition for this academic year was paid in full at the start of school." During physical education class, Lu Yan, with an air of superiority, commanded me to return the basketballs scattered across the court to the equipment room. Without the need for contemplation, I knew she was up to some mischief again. Sure enough, as I placed the last basketball inside and prepared to pull the door open, I discovered it was locked from the outside. "It wouldn't budge."
A mera triviality.
I scoffed, disdainfully curling my lips, and promptly pushed open the equipment room window, nimbly climbing out. However, as fate would have it, I inadvertently landed atop someone. With a muffled groan of pain, I realized I was awkwardly seated on a stranger's lap. "Are you all right?" I stammered, scrambling to get off him. Upon closer inspection, I was startled to see it was Xin Huichuan. Hadn't he taken a leave of absence? What was he doing here? He was drenched in sweat, his face pale, and he responded to my inquiry with, "Are you all right?" There I was, sitting on his lap, and I could distinctly hear the sound of a bone fracturing. Thus, barely stepping back into the school, Xin Huichuan had to leave again, limping along with my assistants to the infirmary. His right leg had sustained a noble injury, encased in a thick layer of plaster. We became the epitome of misfortune in our class, one visibly struggling, the other genuinely so. My mother, Wei Lan, was preoccupied with the chaos of managing her company, leaving her no time to concern herself with me. As the college entrance examination approached, everyone was busily preparing for their futures. Those with wealth and connections had already secured spots in foreign universities, poised to enhance their resumes abroad. Those with family businesses were preparing to return to inherit their legacies. As for me, caught in a limbo, I could only place my hopes on the upcoming exams. I dusted off my neglected high school textbooks, attempting to cram for the impending tests. Alas, my mind felt as rusty and immovable as an ungreased gear. Xin Huichuan dutifully fulfilled his role as my tutor. Despite his own struggles with mobility, he faithfully came to my home every day, urging me to study. He even meticulously crafted a tailored review plan for me, humorously dubbed the Chick S growth plan. Daily, I found myself straining to study, driven by determination. Sen Huichuan's family treated me with remarkable kindness. In a world where everything revolved around the main characters, the villains often bore tragic pasts. Sen Huichuan, now living a relatively stable and happy life, owed half of that to me. Consequently, I often found myself grinning with pride while working on practice tests. It was as if he had a radar for my little antics, promptly noticing my distractions and gently tapping my head with his paper, reminding me to refocus. After enduring 3 grueling months of intensive preparation, the day of the college entrance examinations finally arrived. On the day I completed my final exam, my father, Li Xiao, my mother, Wei Lan, and the crutch-bound Sen Huichuan awaited me with flowers at the school gate. Wait a moment.
Sen Huichuan.
Didn't you take the exam? I asked in astonishment. He glanced coolly at the sky, responding nonchalantly. I received a recommendation. I was left speechless. Just 2 weeks into summer vacation, explosive news rippled through the business community. The Li Group successfully acquired the Lu Group. The internet erupted. Although my mother had not engaged in business for many years, tales of her legendary acumen upon entering the business world as a college student still circulated. She was once hailed as a rare commercial genius. In fact, my grandfather had contemplated retiring early to entrust the family business to her. Yet it was her ungrateful childhood friend, Lu Chengyuan, who remarked, "Girls should stay at home, raise children, and leave business matters to men," that prompted my love-struck mother to relinquish her potential empire and embrace the role of a devoted wife and mother.
Now,
My father, Li Xiao, marveled at every facet of my mother, Wei Lan, taking pride in her accomplishments and obediently adhering to her every decision, becoming a quintessential henpecked husband. Meanwhile, the main couple, Lu Chengyuan and Li Shuyi, were forced to return the shares they had deceitfully acquired from my grandfather, applying for bankruptcy in a desperate bid for survival. Even the once promising study abroad plans of the protagonists, Lu Yan and Lu Shuyuan, were thwarted by financial constraints, allowing only one of them to pursue studies abroad. Ultimately, Lu Yan became the discarded pawn, even having to engage in a business marriage with another family to barely maintain the remnants of the Lu family's former glory. The notion that the protagonists were destined for love and happiness became a complete farce. The online comments surged. Wow, the supporting character is surprisingly formidable, flipping the script on the villains. I love this plot.
so satisfying.
This is true revenge. I heard the Li couple, Li Xiao and Wei Lan, are also nominated as exemplary citizens this year.
What?
The supporting character led the villains to become the city's exemplary citizens. I chuckled with pride upon reading the comment. Indeed, it was my doing. On the day of the graduation party, neither Lu Yan nor Lu Shuyuan attended, likely too embarrassed to show their faces. As the saying goes, injuries take 100 days to heal. Sen Huichuan's plaster cast had yet to be removed, and he was reluctant to partake in such festivities. Thus, I found myself alone, elegantly donning a beautiful princess gown, casually enjoying small cakes on the side. Many boys blushed, wanting to invite me for a dance, but I graciously declined them all. I carefully lifted my gown and quietly slipped out of the banquet hall towards a secluded corner of the courtyard. Sure enough, beneath the moonlight, I spotted a familiar wheelchair. Stealthily, I approached and teasingly remarked, "Oh, ISNT, this our academically gifted student, Sen Huichuan? Why are you hiding here alone, stargazing?" "TSK, Sen Huichuan. You really are quite contradictory," I continued. "May I have the honor of inviting you, the dashing gentleman in a wheelchair, for a dance?" A rare crack appeared in his usually stoic expression, and he stammered, attempting to discreetly push himself away.
I would not allow him that escape.
Grabbing the handles of his wheelchair, I firmly halted it. "I just wanted to see you," I smiled, my eyes twinkling. I knew he couldn't bear to part with me. Suddenly, a mischievous thought struck me. I helped Sen Huichuan out of his wheelchair, letting him lean on his crutch while I took a seat in his chair. With both hands gripping the wheels, I gleefully propelled down a long slope in the courtyard, shrieking with delight. "Ji Tang, are you mad? That's dangerous. Do you even realize?" Sen Huichuan shouted in exasperation behind me. "Stop." I ignored his pleas, reveling in the exhilarating rush of wind against my ears. When he finally managed to abandon his crutch and hobbled after me, rescuing me from the wheelchair, he wasted no time in firmly pushing me down onto the grass, delivering a light smack to my backside. Though it didn't hurt much, maintaining my dignity was paramount. As I rubbed my sore posterior, I lamented his tyranny. Ultimately, he imparted upon me an even more excruciating lesson, leaving my backside aching even more, along with my legs. Woe is me. "I truly shan't dare again," I pleaded, though internally I harbored a rebellious thought. I would indeed dare next time. After all, who could resist the affection that Sin Huichuan so generously bestowed upon me? I am, without a doubt, the cherished mascot of the villain's lair, the beloved pet of all.